The yellow vaccine engine, introduced in BT14, was the engine to go to when it came to playing yellow moving forward. Security control had largely fallen out of favor, and old powerful yellow decks like Lord Nightmon were a thing of the past. The only problem: when has a generic card, or a series of cards, ever been just used with its intended archetype? When you look at Digimon cards of the past, Doru Greymon was one of the first cards to get a limit because of not Doru Goramon decks in which it was originally intended for, but because of Alphamon. Likewise, you see cards like BT14 Bukamon get run in the overtuned and consistent Mirage Galgamon and Metal Garurumon decks. And even now, you have the arrival of new loop combos that work in combination with Mirage Galgamon. The thing is, when you look at the overall design of BT14 Patamon, TK Takaishi, and Emissary of Hope as an engine that looks for vaccine trait Digimon, this was an oversight mainly because if you truly wanted to limit the engine to Patamon related cards, it could have just easily been Digimon with the Angel in their traits. Because of the genericness of these cards, BT14 T.K. Takaishi would ultimately be the victim on the newest restriction list in addition to Awakening of the Golden Knight. With these two cards now going to 1, how does Vaccine Armor fare at this point? The narrative of today's video is to briefly go over some cards you typically wouldn't see in Vaccine Armor. And because of this, you have new combos and strategies that at times that can make the deck not only hit 1 or 2 security, but 6 in a single go. Not to mention in some quick test games, at times you could recover to 7 security. So with some of these restrictions, what's the game plan? The first thing I want to again emphasize is that these deck profiles I come up with are far from perfect. They have been tested in some games, but again, it all comes down to player preferences and what you personally want to use. Based on the design of this deck, you can freely promote or you can sit back in the raise and take some chip damage. You'll notice the first card on the thumbnail of this video was chirinmon. After seeing BT14 T.K. Takaishi get restricted to 1, the first thing that I wanted to do was to locate a way to replace security with something specific. There are only a handful of Digimon that can place sources of your choice back into the security. What chirinmon does though is that when digivolving, you may trash the top card of your security stack to unsuspend this Digimon. And while the effect is questionable, it does trigger effects like Chirinmon to give a Digimon jamming, while simultaneously letting you unsuspend. The thing is, chirinmon's when digivolving effect isn't the important part, it's the inheritable when attacking effect. Chirinmon's once per turn when attacking effect only triggers if the security is 6 or fewer total between both players' security stacks. It allows you to place 1 yellow card from your hand on top of your security stack. Could be a Digimon, could be a Tamer, could even be an option card. In playtesting matches, I've used this ability to place Tamers if I wanted insight on what was left in my security via BT1 T.K. Takaishi. I've also used this to place level 4s on top for a guaranteed Digivolution with Patamon the next turn, and also place level 6s that I can explicitly go into via Emissary of Hope. But the best part is always slapping that Heaven's Judgment at the top of security because I know my opponent is about to have a bad time. Prior lists that I have seen for Yellow Vaccine Armor, notably the ones from the Grand Asia Open event, featured a deck that only had 8 level 4s in the form of rapidmons. But with TK no longer able to place level 4s as frequently into security, this is why running the goldveedramons in this deck are required. Goldveedramon is the only other level 4 Digimon that has armor and vaccine in trait. While true, Awakening of the Golden Knight can only be used with the armored Digimon, the other purpose this serves is to guarantee the effect triggering for Magnamon X. While yellow armor vaccine decks typically run Rapidmon X and Magnamon X at the top end Digimon, I've been testing around with the concept of Magnamon X from BT9. BT9 Magnamon X has the same requirements as Magnamon X in requiring an armored Digimon or x-antibody in the Digivolution sources to proc its opponent's turn effect. In doing so, this Digimon can in essence become an infinite blocker on your board due to redirecting your opponent's attacks. Additionally, when this Digimon is deleted, it is placed at the top of your security stack face down and keeps the stack in play. There are 2 reasons why I found running this card in armor vaccine decks to be helpful. Number 1, it is a secondary redundant source that could be used in combination with Magnamon X. With newer cards in EX7 potentially stripping your sources on attack declaration, you'd still have at least 1 armor source or Magnamon X in order to guarantee the activation of Magnamon X. Number 2, replacing itself into the security also means that should your level 5 maintain its position in play, you can also utilize Emissary of Hope to guarantee digivolving back into Magnamon X from either BT9 or BT16 in order to continue your assault. When your level 5 is Rise Greymon from BT2, it's absolutely nuts. These are the newest additions to the Yellow Vaccine deck that I honestly found a lot of fun to play with. Are they perfect? Not by any means. But when it comes to making changes to your play, this could be the way to go. Moving again to the deck profile, I'll cover not just the general outline of the deck, but the substitutions that you can utilize. Level 2 wise, there are a lot of ways for you to tackle this. Generally, you'll find most Yellow Vaccine decks and Armor Vaccine decks running the Takamons from BT14. This level 2 has the simple inheritable of your turn once per turn. When a card is added to your security stack, draw 1. This effect mainly procs now through the tamers like BT1 T.K Takaishi, BT14 T.K Takaishi, Emissary of Hope, and of course, chirinmon. But because the consistency now lacks 4 copies of BT14 T.K, my secondary egg is now chirinmon for that inheritable jamming when the security changes via card effect. Patamon? Triggers. TK? Triggers. chirinmon? Triggers. Chirinmon is still a viable candidate as well for providing you extra memory when you trash the top or bottom security card. But with more RNG elements to the deck, I'd like to avoid that if possible. The level 3s are all fairly standard, with the mandatory 4 being the patamons from BT14. This patamon at the start of your main searches your security stack and then digivolves into a yellow Digimon card with a vaccine trait among them without paying cost. Then shuffle the security stack. If digivolved by this effect, you may place 1 yellow card with a vaccine trait from your hand as the bottom card of the security stack. Largely, you can put in other cards like your level 5s to climb up for 1 memory, or even the Magnamon X to get going real fast if you can somehow make it to level 5. This card's inheritable will also immediately proc after your start of main phase effect resolves, because a card is added to the security stack, unless your hand does not have a vaccine Digimon to put back. But for the remaining 3s, these are all flexible choices for you to make. Kudamon from BT13 can search for a yellow Digimon with vaccine in its traits, and a yellow tamer. Patamon and your option cards are the only cards that fail to find. Starter Deck 3 Patamon can potentially gain you memory from DP reduction to 0, though this is most effective when your opponent has small bodies in play. But the last option I can see most players gravitating to are the floodgates in the form of Pillowmon for stopping your opponent from playing Digimon via card effects, or Cutemon from those Digivolution reduction costs. Unfortunately, while these floodgates are great for matchups like Numamon and conventional decks that use the training cards, if you're up against Ancient Garurumon, you have a problem. Black is the only color that has floodgates in which players cannot ignore Digivolution requirements. Moving to level 4s, every Digimon here has the Armor and Vaccine trait. BT8 Rapidmons are most effective when digivolving into with a tamer in play. This allows you to spend regardless, but the DP reduction only occurs with the presence of a tamer. Goldveedramon is the newest addition here because without BT14 T.K, you're going to need more level 4 targets to potentially hit. But the last option of Rapidmons from the starter deck provides 2 things. Number 1, a blocker that when blocking can hit your opponent for minus 4000 DP, and number 2, a Digimon that gives you plus 1000 DP while the Digimon is suspended. Meaning if Magnamon X attacks into security and hits an option card like Heaven's Judgment, it will survive long enough to gain its immunity and unsuspend. You'll notice this variant of the deck opts not to run the Ace Digimon. While you could run Magna-Angemon Ace or Angelwomon Ace for this build, the use of Rise Greymon and chirinmon gives this deck a lot more utility to manipulate security or clear security in 1 turn. Ultimately, a lot of ways my decks are now designed is to pseudo-clear as much security as possible in 1 turn. Because of this, even though you may hit multiple tamers, memory boosts, or delays in the security, that value means nothing if you've already defeated your opponent. Rise Greymon especially can be a huge factor in big swings in a turn, when you attack with Magnamon X from BT9. Because by using Emissary of Hope with the knowledge there is a BT16 Magnamon X in the security, you can digivolve on top of Magnamon X into this variant, unsuspend, go 2 checks again, and then go 2 more. In essence, a 6 security breaker. But for the top end lines, your BT9 Magnamon X serves as a backup source to trigger BT16 Magnamon X's effect. You could decide not to max these out and run other options like Venusmon or other prior versions like Rapidmon X. What I found hilarious is that you can attack into people's Digimon whether they're 11 or 12,000 DP, and then if you trade, Magnamon X goes back to the top. And look, Emissary of Hope lets you go right back into it no problem for 1 memory. Or even the BT16 one if it's been cycled into the security and you can unsuspend and start smashing more security. Your option card lineup is 2 Heaven's Judgment as security bombs, though you could easily drop this to just 1 or not even run it at all. With chirinmon, if your opponent and you have 6 or less security total, you could slap this on top as a security bomb against the opponent. 1 Awakening of the Golden Knight to skip the level 5 and jump straight into Magnamon X from your level 4s, which is honestly pretty busted. And 3 copies of Emissary of Hope. Emissary of Hope I dread is going to be another victim on the restriction list at some point, because this card is basically HPD but for yellow decks. Even turn 1 Patamon and BT1 T.K is a lot of information, especially if you have this card in your hand. Hilariously, I've had one moment in testing where I used chirinmon's effect to purposely place this option on top of the security, so when it was attacked into, I played a patamon for free to use the following turn. Finally, your tamers come in the form of BT1 T.K Takaishi at 3 copies, because this tamer largely supplies you information on what's there for you to use. Even if your patamon is deleted, if you know there's an Emissary of Hope there, you might be able to play back patamon for free in the future. Knowing your 4s, 5s, and 6s can also be huge, in case you have the Emissary of Hope in hand. BT6 Takaishi and Kari Kamiya can help with additional memory, as your opponent may opt not to chip away, if you play this tamer out on turn 1 with patamon in the back. But of course, you mandatory need to run that BT14 T.K for adding the top card to your hand and putting a vaccine Digimon back, again, to gain a memory. Remember, though this tamer costs 3, it also triggers itself, meaning most of the time, it should cost 2. Again, I'm not saying that this is the only way to play Armor Vaccine. You may still decide to run other options, like Rapidmon X, Venusmon, Magnamon Ace, and more. Remember, this variant of the list doesn't have any level 7s, no Death Xmon, no Ruin Mode, and no Shine Greymon Burst Mode Ace. Could you run them? Absolutely. But what are your thoughts on the Armor Vaccine post-restriction, and what would you change? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll catch you again on a future upload. This is DIGI-PANDA, logging out.